Good day, everybody. So, today I am very happy to welcome TJ Kirk to the kitchen table. TJ is probably much better known as the Amazing Atheist online. And if you've been on YouTube or even on the internet at all in the last 10 years, you've more than likely come across some Amazing Atheist content in one way or another. But besides being a long-standing and prolific and very influential YouTuber, TJ is also a self-published author and is also a collaborator on a second YouTube channel called The Deep Fried Fat. So I recommend everyone, if you haven't already seen the Amazing Atheist channel, go there, and when you're done, head on over to Deep Fried Fat. And without any further ado, thank you very much for joining me today, TJ.
Thank you.
Awesome. So, like I said, as someone who's been on YouTube pretty much since day one, I think I started following your videos probably close to 10 years ago, like when you were just starting out, I think.
The garage days, yeah.
Yeah. Has it been 10 years?
It's been 12, I think.
Oh, wow, doesn't.
Yep. I believe so. I don't know. It's either 11 or 12. I know it's a little more than 10 at this point.
Okay, so yeah, that would put you pretty much in the first year of YouTube.
Yeah, I think I joined in 2007, maybe 2006. I don't know, somewhere around there. Yeah, right. So it was a very early adopter of the platform.
Definitely. And I don't know if there's too many accounts that have stuck around the whole time either. So that is
No, I can't think of anyone from those days that's still around.
No, for sure. So, but I was really curious, like as someone who's been active on the platform for so long, you must have seen a lot of trends and fads and kind of internet subcultures on YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
Like rise and fall.
Yes.
So I was curious, like for you, which of those have been kind of like the most entertaining, even if it's like entertaining from a facepalm kind of perspective?
Well, for me, even though I've been on YouTube this entire time, I've never been very invested in YouTube from a viewership standpoint. That's not to say I don't watch anything on YouTube. But I've never been someone who's, I don't eat, sleep, and breathe YouTube all the time. So, I mean, a lot of these trends pass by barely noticed by me or only noticed in a very sort of, auxiliary capacity. Like, oh, yeah, this is going on now. But
right. Like, I know YouTube has a real... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I know YouTube has a real kind of mainstream side, like, the trending on YouTube page would really lead you to believe YouTube is one thing, whereas it has like a huge kind of underside, I think. So,
well, YouTube's it's a beast of many faces, so, yeah.
Yeah, so I wouldn't know what kind of cat trends necessarily have been going on year to year, but I was thinking more in like the, the kind of subgenre fads. What ones?
Yeah, like the atheist skeptic community kind of stuff. Yeah, even
that, and like,
like people think that I've watched a ton of that kind of content, but I've maybe seen 6 or 7 Sargon of Akkad videos. I've probably seen 2 or 3 Armored Skeptic videos. I don't think I've ever watched an entire Shoe on Head video. I don't know. I just don't really watch too much of, YouTube. Even, especially the stuff that's in the same wheelhouse as I'm in, and it's like I'll watch a video or two from those people. I even support some of them on Patreon, even though I don't really watch them, because I recognize that this is part of the same sort of community to some extent that I'm in, but I don't devote too much of my time to it, and I think a large part of the reason why is because I don't want to be influenced. Like you said, I've seen trends come and go. I've seen different things come and go, and one of the reasons I think that I've stayed around for the amount of time that I have is because I haven't followed trends. I've just done my own thing throughout my history on the platform, and I've gone through my highs and my lows and my ups and my downs, and but I always kind of just marched to the beat of my own drum, not to use a cliche, but I just did. I really don't pay too much attention to what's going on the platform overall. I hear about it, of course, through other people talking about it or talking to me about it or asking me questions about it.
Right.
But it's never been something that really captured my attention. So I couldn't really talk too much about that. I have a long history on the platform, but aside from making my own content, it's a very casual sort of interaction that I have.
Right. Well, and I think that is a point I was going to come back to, is that you have always been like fairly consistent, and I've noticed that your channel hasn't really been affected by a lot of the kind of rise and fall of different trends and clicks that.
Yeah.
Kind of.
My channel really wasn't drastically affected by anything until recently, with a lot of the changes that YouTube has made to the platform. I've seen some declines because of that stuff. But in terms of the competition or the different trends that take over the platform or take over my corner of the platform, like, I don't know. I feel like I've gotten as far as I have by ignoring that stuff. There's times when I've been like, oh, I could make this video and probably get a ton of views on it, but then I'd be pigeonholed into, oh, now I'm this kind of content or that kind of content. And I found myself accidentally pigeonholed. It's hard to avoid when you've been doing this as long as I have. But, I definitely make a concerted effort to avoid that. A lot of people have asked me for years, what's one of those like common questions that people get asked, like, what's your biggest fear, and
right.
normally my fears are all kind of superficial and silly. That's not the kind of stuff people look for. They're not looking for you to say spiders or snakes or heights or something, which are all things I'm afraid of, by the way.
Right.
They're looking for some kind of deep existential fear, and I finally figured out what it actually is. And ever since I figured it out, I haven't been asked once. So, but to just ask myself and answer for myself, the thing I'm really afraid of is anybody really thinking I'm on their side, thinking I'm on a side in general. I'm on my side. That's what I do.
Right, but it must be hard to kind of avoid that pigeonholing you were talking about when. You want to pursue your genuine interests and, and stick to, you don't kind of want to be the flavor of the day or the cause du jour. You want to stay true to your own interests and your own kind of pursuits, but then you risk kind of getting lumped in with a certain crowd, I guess.
Well, I mean, it happens, and it's happened before. It'll happen again, I'm sure. I don't know. I just kind of tend to do what I want, and if it's moving with the grain or against the grain, I try not to factor that in too much. I don't want to just be a contrarian for the sake of being a contrarian. I don't want to be a conformist for the sake of being a conformist. If I'm incidentally either of those things, then I'm fine with that. But it has to come from a place of honesty. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a huge policy to live by. That's definitely probably a testament to the longevity of your channel for sure. But that's, like you said, though, you've definitely seen like the rise and fall in popularity of different things. Mm-hmm. And as the amazing atheist in general, I think you've definitely kind of outlasted atheism's kind of moment in the sun, I guess you could say, of our culture. So So that was something else I thought would be really interesting to hear your perspective on, was just kind of what the legacy of popular atheism has become, because it really seems like since we lost Hitchens, there's been kind of a vacuum there, and I don't know how well the other three horsemen have kind of carried the torch. So yeah, I'd be really interested.
Sam Harris is seems far more interested in politics at this point. Daniel Dennett, I have no idea what he's doing. Richard Dawkins is a little he's getting pretty old. So I mean those other three guys, I mean they're not doing what they were at that point. Hitchens, of course, is dead. The YouTube atheist community that existed at that point, everyone that was a part of it, part of the new atheist sort of YouTube movement, has either moved on to other types of content or has just faded away. Now that's there's a few out there carrying the torch, like Dark Matter 2525 still does some pretty great animations that are all about atheism and Christianity and other religious worldviews and stuff. There's a few out there that are still kind of carrying on that tradition, and I've seen that there's kind of a burgeoning new atheist community on YouTube. Not to be new atheist as in new now, not new as in
right.
the new atheist movement.
Right.
But I guess they'd probably be like a second tier of that, like New Atheism 2.0. And I've seen a lot of younger creators making stuff, but it's kind of like when I look at it, it's kind of like Atheism 101 stuff that we've already been through it, and the real problem with the atheist stuff is that every argument that you could have has been had, so it's all old hat. If you were there during the time I'm talking about, then you've heard it all. You've heard every Christian apologetic argument. You've heard every Muslim apologetic argument. You've heard every spiritualist argument.
New Age.
Yeah, and I mean it's you've heard it all. You've refuted it all. You've talked about it all till you're blue in the face, and it's just like how many times. I mean, I don't know. I think that we can just take it for granted now that most people with a brain in their heads are not still carrying around the God bug. Now that's not to say there aren't some, and maybe there will be a second renaissance of that sort of content at some point where people become very interested in that debate again for some reason. But I feel like most people who went through that era of YouTube videos, or who went through that era of public intellectuals talking about the atheist topic, I feel like they feel like it's been pretty thoroughly explored and picked down to the bones. And now the stuff that's happening now is more for the generation that's coming up now that wasn't old enough when that stuff was happening to realize all that was going on. And so it's kind of like, okay, well, this is just bringing the same message to another generation, and
right.
That's all well and good, but for me and for those of us who were there, when that stuff was hot from, I don't know, like let's say 2007-ish to maybe 2010, 2011, something like that. Those people all feel like they've seen it all, heard it all, explored it all. I haven't heard an original argument for Christianity or against Christianity in years and years, so I just don't know. I think the God hypothesis has been pretty thoroughly defeated, and if it starts to make any sort of resurgence, then we could talk about that. Now, maybe you could talk about there is a sort of a new insidious form of Christian dogma that's been creeping into the culture that might warrant addressing at some point in the near future. But I do plan on addressing that. That's the the Jordan Peterson variant of Christianity, the Black Pigeon Speaks variant of Christianity, the cultural Christians.
Yeah, and a kind of resurgence of traditionalism.
Right, and it's tied together in that respect. It's like, it's people who are basically atheists. Because, I've listened to Jordan Peterson talk. That man does not believe in a literal creation figure sitting on a throne in a paradise somewhere.
No.
Nor does, Black Pigeon Speaks, another guy that champions this kind of stuff on YouTube. He doesn't believe in it either. He outright says he's an atheist. Or at least he used to. I don't know. I haven't seen his stuff in quite some time. But this idea that, it's basically, Christianity may be bullshit, but it was very useful as a social adhesive, and society is better off with it than without it, so we need to bring it back.
Right.
That argument is something that's maybe not exactly new, but it's definitely something that's surging in popularity. So that's something that someone will have to address. Might as well be me. I don't know. I'll look into it.
Well, and it's definitely. I really did want to talk to you a bit about your kind of response to Jordan Peterson, the Order of Chaos. Because I was listening to that earlier this week, and I enjoyed it, and I definitely did want to talk to you about it. But maybe just before we leave the atheism topic, I was going to ask, because you kind of mentioned that Harris seems to have moved more towards politics, and Dawkins has kind of, give the guy his due. He's
he was a tremendous
retirement.
Guy, but yeah, he's old. He's old. He's gotten old.
It kind of seems like, whereas Harris has moved into politics and kind of embraced it, I almost thought it seemed like Dawkins was almost pushed out of the media by politics.
By feminism. Let's be real.
Yeah.
There was a moment in the movement, and I couldn't give you dates or even roundabout years. I think probably around 2010, 2011, something like that. Whenever, I don't know, the elevator gate thing, I don't know how many people in your audience are familiar with those goings on. That was Skepchick, was that her name?
I think that's it.
And anyway, I don't know what her real name is. I think she goes by Skepchick, or used to. I don't know if she's still around or whatever. Some guy hit on her in an elevator, and he basically said, "Don't take this the wrong way, but would you like to come back to my room for some coffee?" Which, of course, we know what that means. But
exactly, yeah.
It's about the most polite way you could ask that, and I don't think there's anything wrong with someone asking that. And she said, she felt uncomfortable, and whatever. I might feel uncomfortable if someone I wasn't interested in made that proposition to me. I don't think I would vilify them for it. I'd just say no and move on with my life.
Yeah.
But, Dawkins basically said something to that effect about that situation and got in some hot water because there was just this weird thing that happened where this is kind of hard to unpack. In the early days of the atheist community, it was actually a point of pride that we didn't all agree on politics. That was one of the talking points that we all kind of galvanized around, is that, here's a movement that's not about politics. Here's a movement where we've got right-wingers, we've got left-wingers, we've got people all over, we got socialists,
anarchists,
we got communists, we got anarchists, we got statists, we got everybody all under this big, umbrella. Everyone, because we're all fighting for something similar here. We're all tired of religion being used as a tool to force illogical arguments down our throats, and all this stuff. And it was a point of pride. And at some point, us taking pride in our differences politically, ultimately politics showed its true insidiousness and divided everyone apart. I think that the watershed moments were the elevator gate thing, like I just talked about a minute ago. PZ Myers kicking Thunderfoot off of free thought blogs.
Right.
The rise and then very precipitous fall, actually, of atheism plus. There was this kind of weird moment in the zeitgeist where atheism decided, let's split into two factions, and it became atheists who were kind of carrying the banner of the old ways, which I was one of. Yes, the old new atheists, and then the new atheists who to my perception, were kind of pursuing this very dogmatic sort of thing. Like, atheism can't just be about atheism; it has to be about feminism, and it has to be about this, and it has to be about that. I'm like, well, wait, that undermines free thought, though. When you say that it has to,
ideologically focused,
right? People. One of the points against religion is don't give your brain over to a dogma, and then they're like, you know what we could use, guys? Some dogma. It's like, no.
Some really rigid and strict and stifling dogma.
Right, and then everyone who doesn't agree with the dogma, we have to vilify them, and we have to say they're bad, and Dawkins is bad now, and all the YouTube atheists that we used to like are bad now, and so on and so forth. And then it became factionalized, and it ripped itself apart. And it's funny because it really destroyed. I mean, that factionalization really just destroyed atheism as a community, because one side had all the people. That was the side that wasn't doing the atheism plus stuff, but the side that went the atheism plus route, that went the we need a dogma for atheism route, they were the ones that controlled the conferences and stuff. So, back in the heyday of atheism, of new atheism, you used to see these conferences just packed full of people, so vibrant, so lively. Now, they're basically just feminist conferences with a little bit of atheism sprinkled on, and guess what? No one goes to them. Yeah. No one shows up anymore, because it's not even about fucking atheism now. It's like, intersectionality in Western media. It's like, what the fuck does that have to do with atheism? Get your own conference. It's like, I have nothing against a feminist conference happening, but what the fuck does that have to do with atheism? Nothing.
Exactly. And it's really, I think it alienated huge portions of people who would have otherwise been interested,
Oh yeah, it certainly did. And like I said, don't get me wrong on this. I have no problem with feminists speaking their mind, with feminists having conferences. I don't even have a problem with there being some feminist stuff on an atheist panel, because that obviously is a significant amount of overlap there. There's plenty of atheist feminists. There's plenty of feminist atheists, whatever order you want to put that in. But
and there's
when you take it over and make everyone else feel unwelcome, you've basically just destroyed everything that we worked to create. And, it really is too bad that Hitchens died, because he probably would have put a stop to it.
Yeah, I miss Hitchens sometimes so much these days. Sometimes I wish he would have lived to see Trump. I feel like he really got robbed. But
yeah, I feel that way about a lot of my dead heroes, I wish that George Carlin could see where we are now and comment on it. I wish that Bill Hicks could see where we are and comment on it.
Oh God, yes.
There's plenty of these guys, a lot of comedians, a lot of musicians, a lot of these people who are observant of the culture. Hitchens, of course, one of the chief among them, that I'd love to see their perspectives, but they're just gone, so you can't hear it anymore.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like that torch has been passed to anybody. There's no who's the Hitchens now. There is no more Hitchens. There's no person that's gonna take that and run with it. I've not seen anyone who's up to the task, not even close.
No, But I mean, he's a pretty rare breed, I think. But
Right.
I agree. I haven't seen anyone that I would predict would kind of fill that void.
Yeah, and we're
But-
so desperately in need, but
But
we don't
like
we don't
you
have
were
it.
saying, there's definitely a new public intellectual on the scene that's made like probably a bigger splash than maybe even Hitchens did himself. Well, maybe not. Hitchens definitely caused some shitstorms.
Oh yeah, he did. No,
but,
but
I mean,
yeah,
yeah,
Peterson.
Jordan Peterson.
Peterson is definitely. He's definitely in that realm.
Yeah, phenomenon.
Not in my mind a worthy successor in any way, shape, or form, but definitely you can't take the impact he's had away from him.
No. And I
got to
guess
give the guy props for that for sure.
I guess before I kind of like hand it back over to you on this topic, like for me as I'm in Canada, and I'm a recent graduate student, so I'm kind of in Peterson's world in those two ways a bit. So for me, Peterson was a hero for coming out and really just speaking plainly about the nonsense that's going on in universities, right?
Right.
And how kind of closed off they've become ideologically. How
Right. Real
like,
problem, by the way. Yes.
Yeah, like how possessed of political correctness they've become, and his stance against some of the Canadian legislation that was coming through, Bill C-16, was pretty heroic to me too. And obviously, not that I should have to clarify this, but I will, not because I hate trans people, but because I hate the idea that my government can mandate the speech of anybody, right?
Right.
So in those ways, I admire Peterson hugely. But I also really did resonate with what you were saying in your introduction in your first chapter in The Order of Chaos.
Yes.
Yeah. An Antidote to Meaning, because I do feel like there's something very important about the kind of creativity and potential and just madness of chaos, right?
Yes.
Like, but what I thought your video really, to me, my biggest takeaway from it was just a reminder that it's an inseparable binary, right? That you can't have one without the other.
Right. And I think even Peterson recognizes that.
Oh, I'm sure he does. He just, his, I guess, what he sees right now is more of a need for order.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, why don't you maybe give more of an introduction to your stance on Peterson and room cleaning and
well, one of the main criticisms that I put forth, especially in that first chapter, and by the way, the book is not really necessarily supposed to be viewed as this is a response to Peterson. What this is me seeing him laying this groundwork for here's how I see the world, and me saying, okay, this is not how I see the world at all. This is almost totally antithetical to how I view the world. So I think I need to put my own version of how I see the world out there. So basically, he inspired me to do what he did, but just with my ideas instead of his. And, I don't have... he has this idea of, oh, well, these are rules for life. I don't really agree with that. Like, once again, it just seems like, here's some dogma. I'm not interested in dogma. I'm not interested in following it. I'm not interested in creating it. I'm just interested in sharing some interesting ideas. But one of the things that I think is most disagreeable to me about Peterson's viewpoints, other than his strong regressive streak trying to pull us back into traditions that he's romanticized, that we're not as great, or even not even were they not as great as he says they were. They weren't great at all. There's a tremendous amount of deference to, we need to go back to the old ways. And it's something that's really strong in the zeitgeist right now. I mean, Trump's Make America Great Again slogan, and, Peterson's traditionalism. There's a big push for, we need to turn back the clock. Things have gotten too chaotic, too confusing. The world doesn't make sense to us anymore. We got to push it back. You can't go back. The monsters that Pandora unleashed don't go back in the box. But you know what? You live with those monsters long enough, you start to see that maybe they're not just monsters. Maybe there's virtues to these monsters. And chaos is a virtue. Chaos has a power of creation that order just doesn't have. When you have order, what you have is status quo. When you have status quo, you can get change, but it's very incremental. It's very slow. It's very meticulous. If you want big, explosive bursts of change, that only comes from chaos, because that is chaos. Chaos is what defies the norm, what defies what's going on. And I think that a lot of people are frightened by the chaos of our times. Not necessarily the chaos in terms of violence and stuff like that, because we've always lived with that as human beings. But the chaos of there's no more, the uniformity of thought is really deteriorating. And it's getting harder and harder to put together coalitions of people who think the same. We saw that break down. We just talked a moment ago about the chaos of factionalization breaking apart the atheist community. But you know what?
Yeah.
May it rot in hell. It had its time in the sun. It died. It died. It got factionalized. And, I think that Peterson, I've seen the stuff he's talking about. He knows, just as I know, that what this is leading to is individualism. And for him, individualism is the scary, bad, evil word. For me, it's a beautiful, sexy word that I do want people to have this rugged individualism about themselves, where they're not just, hey, I've got this prepackaged system of thought. And what I see where he's afraid of it. He's afraid of it because he thinks that it's just going to make cooperation between people impossible. It's going to make people so selfish and narcissistic and egotistical and disconnected from one another that they're not going to be able to function. And, I think for a time he might be right, but I think that people will figure out that they're going to figure out that balance of, okay, I'm this individual, I have my own unique perspectives and my own unique thoughts, and I don't come with this prepackaged sort of ideological operating system. But I'm going to have to give deference to other people and other points of view, and I'm going to have to find commonalities, and I'm going to have to forge alliances, and it's not going to be perfect. And this era that we're in right now, where the slightest little difference between two people just rips them asunder, that needs to come to a close. What we really need to learn is not how to all think alike. We need to learn to tolerate people who think differently. That's what's going to solve the fucking problem. And Peterson has a very different approach. He thinks that conformity is the answer. I don't agree. I think he's a fucking retard.
Well, I definitely agree that, or I can also see when I watch Peterson sometimes that I think he genuinely does have a fear that society will come to the point where it can't communicate.
Yes.
Because of the way it's kind of fractured and become polarized and mired in all these identity politics.
Right.
So I think that is genuine.
But I mean, he plays the identity politics game too, though. I mean, everything he doesn't like is it's a postmodernist, it's a nihilist, it's this, it's that. I mean, he's got his own labels he slaps on people and plays the identity politics game. He's not beyond it. He's not functioning on some higher level. So, I mean, he criticizes it while he participates in it. You can't really do
Right.
that.
And
identity
there's a
politics. Yeah, go ahead.
contradiction. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say there is a contradiction in, encouraging people to, fortify themselves and become better individuals by all doing the same thing, right? Like, it's hard to get around the contradiction in that.
Well, one thing too is, and I should probably just throw this out there too, because it's another huge criticism. The whole clean your room thing. What he means by clean your room is put your own house in order before you try to change the world. And I'm sorry, but take even a cursory glance around history, and that's just not how things work. It's just plainly not how they work. So many people who have changed the world for better or for worse, and that, by the way, is entirely subjective, but the people who have changed the world, by and large, have not had clean rooms. They have not had their houses in order. They have not been perfect people.
No.
There's people from, from just, maybe they just have something minor like, they slept around a little bit or something, but it could be huge stuff like they're a murderer or they were accused of rape or whatever the fuck else. But people, good, evil, in the middle of that, whatever sort of moral, value you want to assign to people from all over that moral spectrum have done things that have changed the world in profound ways. So
Absolutely.
this idea you got to have yourself in order before you can dare to try to change the world, silly to me.
And you just have to look at art or music in the last 1,000 years. Most of the people that changed the world in that sense had very tortured and messy lives, right?
Right. And who wants a sane artist? That's another thing that this is kind of getting off the topic of Peterson, but there's a rabbit hole there if you want to look at it. It's the sanitization of art, where like Kanye West is fucking crazy. Yeah, no shit, he's crazy. He's a fucking artist. He's supposed to be crazy.
Yeah.
What do you want? Do you think sane, normal, well-adjusted people can create good art? Sorry, they fucking can't. I'm getting a little worked up here. I'm sorry. Let me just.
No, it's fine.
I'll pull back a little bit.
It's all good. I get worked up about art too. It's important.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's true, and that's something. Maybe I'm getting old. I'm not as in touch with the hip scene as I used to be, or something. But it really seems like the world of art and music these days is just beige.
Oh God, it's horrible.
Yeah,
it's reprehensible.
And, even there's a lot of. There's still bands from the 70s that are hanging on, but there's kind of bands that used to be edgy that are now just falling into that same trap. I'm thinking of the NOFX incident that just happened.
That made me want to fucking puke.
Dude, their very own did they read their own lyrics lately? When did punk rock become so safe?
Oh my God, it was sickening. And the whole they come out, they tell this fucking offensive joke, and then the club, the little punk rock whatever bowling or some shit, which that alone shouldn't even be a thing. But they're like, oh, we're so sorry that they said what. Punk rock is supposed to be dangerous and offensive, you fucking simpering little pussies. Exactly. It's supposed to be offensive. It's supposed to be in your face. It's supposed to piss you off and say things that make you mad. And now they're going to apologize for it? We're sorry that we were punk rock in 2018. Fuck that. Fuck the people who got offended, fuck the venue that apologized, and fuck NOFX for apologizing. What a bunch of pussies.
It's even worse to me that the apology didn't come out until after they lost that punk rock bowling or whatever, and they lost a brewing company that was going to make some NOFX beer. Apparently they lost that contract too, but I mean, that makes it even worse. It's like, so now, someone yanked a paycheck on you, so now you're going to give a kind of questionably sincere apology, like.
Yeah, because what society really needs is punk rock beholden to corporate interests. That's good.
Yeah, that's excellent.
Yeah, I'm not happy about it. I'm not happy about a lot of the stuff that I see, and like the Roseanne thing, I mean, we're going to pull that off the air. We're going to not only are we pulling it off the air, we're going to stop even showing reruns of it because now that's bad. Or, even like some of these people who've done like truly reprehensible shit like Kevin Spacey. Like what? I'm supposed to, American Beauty is a bad movie now? Nope. Sorry, it ain't. Still good. No. I don't care. No, exactly. Bill Cosby was still a fucking great comedian. I don't care if he raped a bunch of people. I mean, I do care, but it doesn't affect the art. It doesn't. No. And this idea that it does is just one of the worst aspects of what's happening with art, and it's being used to sanitize art. It's being used to fucking turn all of these artists of the day into. I mean, I don't know what to call them. I guess normie is the fucking nomenclature of the day. Yeah, they're a bunch of normie fucking little goodies who just want to suck the dick of the system and be like, yeah, system. It's like, what happened to fuck the system? What happened to rebellion? And now if they do that, it's just dismissed as like, oh, that's just edge. It's like, yeah, anything that goes against the grain must just be edge for the sake of edge. There's a good excuse not to think about what any of it means, you fucking dolts. All right, once again, I'm getting too passionate, sorry.
No need to apologize. But, right, and I mean, first of all, if anyone had ever listened to Roseanne unscripted or read her Twitter anytime in the last, 5 years, she's fucking, a little bit odd, and a little bit outrageous, and a little bit fucking...
I mean, it's all conspiracy shit. It's right-wing conspiracy shit. I mean, she's not... Look, once again, though, she's a fucking comedian, okay? That's a form of artist. These... Yeah,
and she was a damn good one, too. Yes. She was pretty cutting edge in her day,
Yeah, she was. And apparently she still is. But the thing is that, you're not going to find a tremendous surplus of sanity and well-adjustedness in people who create fucking art, because they have to, by the nature of what they do, look at things from unusual perspectives, look at things from outside the box. That's why comedians like Dane Cook are no goddamn good, because they don't have that in them. That's what happens when you want comedy for and by normal people. You end up with Dane Cook, you end up with Kevin Hart, you end up with that tepid, bland, vanilla shit.
Yeah.
You have to have an outsider's perspective, and Roseanne had one, and ABC knew it. I mean, ABC signed her when she had tweets up like, Hillary Clinton is a reptilian pedophile from Dimension X. And they still signed her. They knew what the fuck she was. It's almost like they just planned for it to happen. I don't like to get into conspiracy territory, but you're going to fire Roseanne for being Roseanne when you knew when you signed her that she was fucking Roseanne?
I know.
I mean, what did you think you were going to do? Control her?
I liked your Tim Allen angle on that, by the way. That's a good theory.
Oh, it was definitely Tim Allen. Tim Allen orchestrated the whole thing. He's a Machiavelli. I thought he was just a grunting buffoon who went, but no, he's actually a Machiavellian genius who played the American media like a fucking cheap fiddle. And I should have known it. Because there was a day in, I think, 1996, 1997, when he had the top movie in the country, the top television show in the country, and the top-selling book in the country. And I should have known that was more than just a coincidence. I should have known that this is a master manipulator of media, and that he was not going away anytime soon. Tim Allen, he's not talented at comedy, he's not funny at all, but he has one true talent, and that's staying on top and he's done it. Most people, I mean, like think about how obscure most '90s sitcom stars are in comparison to Tim Allen.
Oh yeah, have you seen Blossom lately?
Yeah. It's those people like comedians especially tend to have their little heyday. They tend to have their little decade or maybe decade and a half reign, and then people get sick of them and they fade away. People were sick of Tim Allen fucking 20 years ago, and his ass is still around getting sitcoms and making lucrative deals with Fox and stuff. Going
on late night and shit.
Yeah. So that guy is. I mean, like if we're gonna drop the kayfabe here for a second, I don't think that he actually orchestrated any of this Roseanne shit, but the guy has got the luck of the fucking devil. I don't know. He's it's crazy. They canceled his show. Then Roseanne gets a show on the same network that canceled his show for being conservative. She gets canceled after a season, but just before that happens, just before she gets canceled, his show gets renewed on another network based on the strength of her show. So the only person who really made out from this whole Roseanne thing, the only person who won is fucking Tim Allen. How does that work?
Yeah.
What a perplexing and strange situation. Sorry.
Oh, great.
Had to get a drink. Had to smoke a little bit of a cigarette, you know.
Oh, yeah, I'm a house smoker, so...
I can't smoke in my house. I'm not allowed. So, you know.
It would be better if I wasn't allowed to smoke in this house, but I am, so I do.
Well, if it was me left to my own devices, I definitely would be an indoor smoker. But I live with other people who would not appreciate it, so... you know.
Right. So, all right. So I want to kind of move on to a slightly related, slightly different topic. But before we leave the Peterson issue, I wanted to ask you about one last thing.
Okay.
There was a comment I saw. I think it was on either the introduction to Order of Chaos or the first part. But someone basically said, you know, I wonder how TJ feels being one of the big influences that created, or that, how did it go? Let me just look it up here. Oh, yeah, like how you would feel being one of the kind of main YouTube forces behind this kind of anti-SJW movement. Mm-hmm. that kind of created the environment for Peterson to flourish in. Because, I mean, that's what he kind of took off with, was his free speech. And, you know, it was all these kind of SJWs that protested him that really, you know, hurled him into the realms of infamy. And, you know, and honestly, I think if it wasn't for people like you that started drawing attention to how ridiculous things were getting in the social justice warrior scene, then this whole kind of moment we're in now wouldn't maybe even have been possible. So what's that like?
Well, you know, the thing about it is, I did a video in 2011 called "It's Only Sexist When Men Do It," which, as far as I can tell, was the first big anti-SJW video on YouTube. I don't know if it was the first. I don't think it was the first anti-SJW video on YouTube at all, but I think it was the first one to be successful. It was the first one to get a ton of views. It made the front page of Reddit. It was a very big video for me at the time, and because it was so successful, I started pursuing that topic more and more, because I realized, there's like a lot of people who are out there getting kind of sick of this PC garbage that's being shoved down our throats. Right. And, it was all that other stuff happened around the same time. The elevator gate stuff, the Thunderfoot versus PZ Meyer stuff. A lot of stuff like that happened. The big red video came out around that time. You know, the very obnoxious feminist woman screaming at people in the streets, and just having zero civility, zero sort of tolerance for anyone else to speak their mind, just thinks that her point of view is the only one that matters. So there was a lot of that stuff going on in the zeitgeist at the time, and I capitalized on it. I saw it happening, and I was one of the first to capitalize on it. A lot of people followed suit. Something happened with that where it became there was this conflation that if you're liberal, you are an SJW. SJWs are liberals, liberals are SJWs, and that's kind of that was a big springboard for people like Steven Crowder to get popular. It was a big springboard for people like Black Pigeon Speaks and Hunter Avalone and a bunch of these other right-wing YouTubers, and then people like Sargon of Akkad started kind of riding that red wave as well, and then eventually we got to the point of Trump, and we got to the point of Peterson, and now it's pretty unrecognizable from what I participated in the early days. Now, I don't know how much of an impact I personally had on any of that, but I have to realize I was a part of it. But, ultimately, the reason for the backlash against SJWs was not me figuring out that this is on people's minds and doing something about it. The reason that exists is because of the unreasonableness and uncompromisingness of the SJWs themselves. Right. There was just so many things they did that just showed people that they're not tolerant, they're not willing to put up with other people's perspectives, they're not willing to have reasonable discussions, they're not willing to have reasoned debates, they're not willing to even entertain the possibility that their ideas might be wrong or misguided or mistaken, and that sort of stuff. It made people want to do things just to quote unquote trigger libs. A lot. I mean, how many people voted for? How many people voted for? Right? What's that?
I said, who can resist when it's so easy?
Right. Exactly. I mean, it's not hard to quote unquote trigger the libs. Especially when you're talking about the SJW. People and all this stuff. I mean, it's easy. It's not hard to trigger them. You don't even have to try a lot of the time. All you have to do is just be honest about your opinion, and you're probably going to find yourself on the wrong side of them. So a lot of people I know voted for Trump. You see this meme all the time. You go to a crazy SJW video, and one of the top comments is always, this is why Trump won, or this is why Trump will get reelected, or whatever. And it's because Trump people are like, people see these crazy SJWs and they're like, we're going to vote for Trump again just to trigger these people again. But those people are just as stupid as the SJWs ever were, to vote for someone because you out of spite for another group you don't like. I hate this group of people, so I'm going to vote for the people that they least like. So it's become kind of silly. It's kind of hard to even talk about anymore, make videos about, because now if I make an anti-SJW video, I'm automatically lumped in as, oh, well, you're obviously part of the right wing.
You're a Nazi.
Yeah, I mean, and it's crazy. I think I actually hold a world record for pissing off both sides of the most issues, because there's nothing they hate more than someone who's not going to take one of their sides or the other. There's nothing they hate more than someone who calls bullshit on both sides of the issue, because the truth is, and it's a truth that you don't hear enough, it's a truth that no one wants to recognize, there aren't two sides to every issue. There's tons of different sides every issue. There's a plethora of different positions you could have on any issue. It's usually not a binary of for or against. There's usually a huge, not even not even necessarily a gradient, but just like, you know, you look at the political compass, you know, it's a fucking grid for a reason, because people fall all over that thing. But still people are sucked into this dichotomy of, oh, it's the left or it's the right, or it's the anti-SJWs, it's the SJWs, and it's this and it's that. And people always want to default to some ideological preset, and it's either everyone has this "you're with us" or "you're against us" mentality. Well, I'm not with you or against you. I'm just with myself, trying to think independently, and you know, you're punished for that. You know, I just find it. I wouldn't mind so many people finding themselves in opposition to things I say if they would at least address them in an honest way. But instead, it's always about, oh, well, you said this, so you must be with these people. Oh, well, you said this, so you must be with those people. No, I'm not with any of those people. I'm not with anybody.
Yeah, the level of tribalism in these kinds of conversations is becoming like unbearable.
Oh God, it's horrible.
In a lot of ways.
It is horrible. But yeah, that's so. I mean, as far as my culpability, I don't take any responsibility for it. But you know, I definitely was part of that early anti-SJW thing. But my whole objection to the SJWs was that these people don't want to give you your fair say. They don't want to let you respond to them in any meaningful way. They don't want to have meaningful dialogue or discourse. And at this point, those criticisms are all applicable to the opposition as well. So, you know, it's really just the SJWs truly have won, because all they've done is just there's now left-wing SJWs and right-wing SJWs. There's now left-wing snowflakes and right-wing snowflakes. It's really a kind of a disgraceful state of affairs to my perception. It is.
I agree in a lot of ways, because even if there's this so-called culture war now, which you could maybe argue that the anti-SJW side is winning, I mean, you're still kind of allowing their antics and their ideas to dominate the conversation, right?
Well, I mean, all the tactics of the SJWs have been adopted by the anti-SJWs. It's about, I don't like this idea. It's not, okay, well, let's argue with that idea. It's, let's figure out how we can censor that idea. Let's figure out how we can smear the person saying that idea. Let's figure out how we can hurt the people who believe that idea. Let's figure out how we can generate moral outrage to this statement or that statement. And, you know, so, I mean, in my mind, the SJWs have totally won. They've completely won, because they've turned the opposition into a mirror image of themselves, who use their same disgusting tactics. You know, even if you want to look at it from a less nuanced position of just, okay, well, here's these two factions, I still think the SJWs have the upper hand. You know, the anti-SJWs, there's lots of them. They got it's like in the early days of the YouTube atheism factionalization we talked about earlier. Yeah, the people weren't with the atheism plus kind of stuff, but all of the institutions were with the atheism plus stuff, and it's the same way now. You know, the majority of people that you see or encounter or talk to are probably more of an anti-SJW bent than they are of an SJW bent. Although I think, like I said earlier, that they've all been corrupted by the SJW tactics. But even putting that aside, you have to admit the SJWs, they dominate the media, they dominate entertainment, they dominate education. Yeah. So you know, all of these social institutions that people used to have some respect for, they're all losing because they're diminished in respect. But ultimately, you know, those institutions, they're not being replaced. There's not a, you know, like a lot of people didn't see Solo because of the SJW influence on Star Wars, or the perceived one anyway. a lot of people calling it soylo because of the whole soy thing.
The soy boy thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So
now.
they call it soylo and all this stuff. But it's not like there's another studio out there putting out edgy stuff that doesn't pander to this narrative. There was a big outcry against the Thundercats reboot because it's obviously fallen under the same thing, and kind of getting back to the influence they have on entertainment. I mean, yeah, people are rejecting it to some extent, but there's not really anybody coming up with a counter voice. It kind of just becomes like you're trapped in the Anita Sarkeesian space of, everyone can criticize this art, everyone can criticize this entertainment, everyone can criticize the mentality this is coming from, but they're not really providing their own alternative to it. There's not some sort of edgy anti-SJW space movie that's a response to Solo. There's not, there's not that counter voice coming up. So I don't know. I think that ultimately everyone's losing. I don't think there's a winner or a loser. I think that once again, it's just going to destroy itself. Both sides are going to destroy themselves. Both sides are going to corrupt each other. Both sides are going to ultimately find that they're diminished by this conflict. And that's where I think we are on that.
Well, that might be the best possible outcome anyway. But,
maybe. Sometimes you got to press the reset button.
Yeah. But, I mean, that's kind of something else... leads back to something else I thought we could talk about, because it seems like there's been a major switch where with kind of SJW tactics and concern that's taken over, like you said, everything from like art and culture to education and politics. And it seems like not that long ago, what was popular in all of those places and institutions was a kind of anti-authoritarian sentiment. And now it seems to have switched where it's like the authority is like sacred. Especially in music, where I can think in the 90s, like a lot of things that were popular and edgy and counterculture at the time, today would be like just unacceptable. Like they probably wouldn't even make it to print or to pressing. When I was growing up in the 90s, there was Marilyn Manson putting out, Antichrist Superstar. Like, could you see a mainstream label putting out lyrics like, everybody's someone else's nigger, I know you are, so am I? Right.
I see them balking from that,
And even stuff like right now, I'll just go ahead and put it out there that TJ and I are kindred spirits in that we're both lifelong, I think, Manson fans. So this is definitely ground we have to cover. But even I'm thinking in like rap music that was popular when I was growing up and when I was in high school, like even the first Eminem album now.
Oh God, yeah, you couldn't it wouldn't even, yeah.
Dude, like the outrage would be, like, I think people would have strokes. Like,
yeah, I mean, there's so much that artists have to contend with now of, here's the things you're not allowed to say, here's the things you're not allowed to be, here's the things you're not allowed to do. And, when we were in the 90s, there was, Puritans and moralists who tried to control that stuff. But now it's like they've won, and they didn't win. It wasn't the traditional enemy of art, which is the staunch right-wing conservative clutching their pearls. It's not that person who castrated art and sanitized art. It was the people who used to defend it. It was the liberal progressives who used to be all about, people need to, we need to have freedom of speech and we need to fight the system and all this stuff. And now it's like, oh, the system's great. We love the system.
Yeah. And you know what? I've been thinking about this a lot for like quite a while now, and trying to think of the best way to kind of put my finger on it and articulate it and everything. And I haven't really come up with the best way yet, but it seems like it's so weird. Like, I think a lot of I think it's 1996 on the Antichrist album, the anti-choice, and it just seems like, even though that at the time was more directed at like a fundamentalist, staunchly tradition based and Christian based kind of censorship, like now, I mean, that could be directed at universities or like at SJWs or any. It's just, and I still can't quite pinpoint like how and when and why that all happened, but it's almost like being an upside down world.
Right. I mean, and the thing is that free speech doesn't really have much of an ally these days. It doesn't have an ally in the left, doesn't have an ally in the right, doesn't have really much of an ally anywhere in the center, quote unquote. I mean, it's just it's like, okay, we got one side that's like, oh, tradition and family values and we need to return to the past, and then we got another side that's like, I'm a dragon kin and I'm bi gender and I'm all these things, and anyone who criticizes it or says anything that upsets me in any way, shape, or form is bad. And so, I mean, like, we got people fighting that they're like tradition or nothing else, and we got people who are saying my weird counterculture, endless deference to it, or nothing else. And, as a result, everyone is walking on eggshells because both sides are throwing them down. And so the result is, rappers who used to be, rapping about, oh yeah, I'm going to kill this person, I'm going to do these drugs, and I'm going to, fuck the whores and all this stuff, used to be dangerous music. Now it's, I got this media empire, and look at all my money, and look at all my cars, and look at all my TVs, and look at my pool, and
and my clothing
look
line.
at all my money, and look at my fucking, it's like, it's become, it went from being about extolling or at least talking about life on the streets and the hard life, and now it's all about I'm this entrepreneur, I'm a bitch for the system, look, I got my own shoes made by third world fucking slave labor, it's great. It's like, no, it's not great, you piece of shit. Fuck you. And rock music is fucking dead. The only vestige that I see now, I mean, like, there's still some of the old bands kicking around, but, Manson's still kicking around, and a few others are still kicking around in some way, shape, or form. The only fucking thing that's new that has any sort of fucking intrigue behind it is stuff like Ghost. But I don't know. It's just there's just a tremendous emptiness in pop culture where there's no one's dangerous, no one's interesting. It's all just about following the rules and being a goody two shoes and virtue signaling, and I don't know. It's garbage.
Yeah,
it's just fucking garbage.
Like, so granted, I mean, Manson had kind of stepped away from more like social and cultural commentary in his work, like, well before this kind of shift happened.
Sure, like around 2003-ish.
Yeah, but still, it seems like what was a pretty continuous and long-standing tradition in rock music, like, I would say starting with Bowie, like early Bowie too, like where shock rock and that kind of theatrical rock performance was a really powerful and really like just fascinating and wonderful social commentary, right? And kind of almost social correction in a way too. And then I think Manson was huge in that way. Yeah. And now it's definitely a void. And I mean, I don't really like expect Although I guess in a way I'm a little disappointed that it's not Manson to kind of pick up that torch again. But
well, I mean, it'd be kind of unprecedented if he did, honestly, because there's not been a whole lot of. I mean, I can't think of a single instance in the history of music as a means of counterculture where someone showed up, rocked the boat, and then kind of had their heyday and then came back later and did it again. That's like kind of like, I mean, it's a tall order. Most people only get that one little period of shaking things up. And, I think it's probably a tall order to expect him to do that again, but it's tremendous to me that there's not anybody else. It's just like we were talking earlier about where's that person to fill the void of Hitchens. Well, look, I mean, like if we look at music history, when the blues arrived on the scene, that shook things up like crazy. When Elvis arrived on the scene, that shook stuff up like crazy. The 60s, you had the Stones, you had the Beatles, you had the Doors. That was shaking things up like crazy. In the 70s, you had Kiss, who the parents protested against, and they said, it stands for Knights in Satan's Service. Oh my God, they're evil. They're going to corrupt our youth.
Don't listen to it backwards.
Yeah, I mean, in the 80s, you had your counterculture people, although it was a lot more about just like, we're having fun and getting our dicks sucked and all that. But there was still those counterculture voices. In the 90s, it was Manson, it was Nine Inch Nails, it was Nirvana. In the 2000s, it's like crickets. 2010s, crickets. For the better part of 2 decades now, no one's come along in music to shake things up. We've had some public intellectuals like Hitchens come and shake things up. We've had very little, though, in terms of artists. And I don't know what the problem is. I don't know if it's just no one knows what to do. No one knows what button needs to be pushed at this point. I'm not sure, but something's wrong. Because there's no fucking counter narrative to the shit you just see every day. There's no escape from it, and that's not a good thing. That's bad. That's a sign of a stunted culture. And by the way, it's shit like that enables morons like Steven Crowder to go out there and say, conservatism is the new counterculture. It's like, no, you're not. You can't, by the very definition, you cannot be because what you're fighting for is like, we're about traditional values. Traditional values can never be counterculture. It doesn't matter what the culture becomes. You can never be counterculture by trying to hearken back to the past. You have to, if the culture is in one place, the person who comes and says, let's go back to where it was before, that's not counterculture. The person who comes along and says, let's take things in a radically new direction we've never even seen before, that's fucking counterculture. And guess what? That's what we're missing. That's what we're sorely lacking. That's why the psyche of America is fucking broken right now. One of the reasons, anyway. Yeah,
well, I think that's a big part of the diagnosis. But on slightly related Manson gossip, I was going to ask you what you thought of Twiggy being kind of quietly dismissed.
Yeah, I don't think that he was that valuable of an asset to the band at that point. Manson got back with Twiggy, recorded, I don't know, what was the first one he recorded with Twiggy back? Was it Born Villain or was it The High and the Low?
I'm pretty sure it was Born Villain was when he came back.
I can't remember exactly what he came back to do, but it wasn't, Twiggy came back and it maybe gave it a little shot in the ass, but didn't really bring it back to that place you would have expected or wanted. It wasn't until Manson got with Tyler Bates that, he really showed us a return to form. And I think that Manson just realized, like, hey, this is the collaborator I really need to be focusing on. This is the guy that really understands what I'm doing now. And so I think that Twiggy's departure is, whatever. It doesn't really matter. It happened, of course, amid some allegations against Twiggy, which, the veracity of that I'm kind of dubious of.
Right. So, I mean, just because I'm sure not everyone is as close followers as we might be. So, I don't know, maybe about 6-8 months ago, give or take, Manson split ways with Twiggy, one of the original members, Marilyn Manson, the bassist, kind of in the height of the Me Too movement, because a woman, I can't remember the band she's in. Anyway,
it was Jack Off Jill.
Thank you. Yes, Jack Off Jill, who they toured with in their early career, came out with some allegations that...
And who Manson named, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yes, although they deny that now, but he did.
Right, yeah.
I mean, you could just... Anybody who knows Manson in his mind knows that he named that band. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
But yeah, she made these allegations against Twiggy. The thing that makes me so suspicious of those allegations is that about a year before she made the allegations, there was a post on her Instagram where she posted a picture of her and Twiggy, and she's like, yeah, good memories, or whatever the fuck. So it's really? This seems kind of like you're just looking for a spotlight to me. I don't know. But that's the whole thing with the whole Me Too thing. I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, so obviously, I have no way of knowing what actually happened. I don't know these people in real life. Maybe, who's to say. But as someone sitting at home on my laptop and who's been a Manson fan, going on 2 decades or something now, I was disappointed because even like you said, I don't think Twiggy was really what was going to bring the band back or something, but I just felt like it was, like he just let him go so easily. I was like...
Well, we're probably looking at a case there where, Twiggy had not written anything on the last 2 albums. He's not really a valuable member of the band at this point. He's just kind of a legacy member.
Right.
Some stuff comes up. Maybe it's like, hey, Twiggy, take him or leave him kind of thing. And then, there's some rape allegations. Fuck it, whatever. Just get rid of him. Who cares?
Yeah.
I think that's probably where Manson's mind was at. I think that if Twiggy had been a valuable, integral part of the band at that point, who was pulling his weight and really making a creative difference in what was going on, I don't think Manson would have dismissed him so cavalierly.
Right.
But I think that just because, if you're going to go to bat and fight for someone, that has to be someone who's fucking valuable to what you're doing, especially, when you're an artist. And if they're not contributing in that way, then why should you? Why should you deal with the hassle of it, Twiggy had his place in Manson history, and he did his thing, but, he had no writing credits on the last 2 albums. He just kind of toured around with the band. He was just he's just a musician collecting a paycheck at that point and kind of riding off his past achievements and not really bringing much to the table. So I think that's probably a big part of the reason why he was dismissed, honestly. I think that the rape thing was just kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah, I'd say that's a fair reading of the situation. There was definitely some, resting on his laurels, no doubt, of, just his kind of recognizability from the early days.
And maybe it's not, it might not even be his fault. It might just be that collaboration that existed, that partnership just wasn't working anymore. The dynamic had changed. People change over time.
Oh yeah,
Manson's changed. Twiggy's changed. So it might not be necessarily his fault. It might not be. He might not even have intended to rest on his laurels. It might have been the ideas that he put forward weren't received well. It might have been a number of things. We don't really know what goes on inside, but
true. And it's not the first time that Manson and Twiggy have split either.
Right.
So.
They were apart for a number of years.
Yeah.
And let's remember that Twiggy's been kicked out of some other bands in the meantime. Like he was kicked out of 9 Inch Nails.
Yeah.
He was kicked out of A Perfect Circle.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So maybe Twiggy's not the easiest guy to work with. Who knows?
Could be. But besides the Manson news, I mean, there's a lot of comebacks kind of going on, in the in place of anything new.
Right.
Are there any, personally, I'm super stoked for the Smashing Pumpkins reunion tour.
Right.
I know not everyone will be, but is there any that you're, really into these days?
I'm always down for Manson, obviously. As far as some of these other, most of the bands that I like, either don't tour much at all because they're old, or they're dead. Nirvana's not going to be getting back together anytime soon.
No, Dave Grohl's just not the same.
Yeah. Well, and the lead singer's dead and everything, so you can't,
Yeah.
It's kind of hard. I don't think people would accept, yay, this is the new lead singer of Nirvana. No, it's not going to work.
No.
And I mean, a lot of the music I like, Tom Waits and Nick Cave, both of whom they don't tour much. I like Leonard Cohen, who just died a couple years ago, I think, maybe a year or two ago, and he was 80-something, old dude. 9 Inch Nails, I haven't liked anything they've done in the last 15 years or something, So I don't know. It's just kind of for me, I don't know. I'm just not really big, and there's not really anything new coming along. I mean, I'm into Ghost. That's probably the thing I'm most okay, yeah, here's something new that's actually kind of interesting. I like there's another band I like that's kind of a newer band called King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. I might have reversed some of those words, but they're good. There's some good bands out there, but as far as things that permeate the mainstream, that penetrate the mainstream, there's not a lot happening there. And maybe there will be. I've seen some signs that maybe there's going to be, if we're stuck in another age of disco here. I mean, you could almost liken what's going on right now to the 70s, where everything that's coming out commercially and mainstream is kind of empty and vacuous. And if and you could almost view Ghost as the new Kiss. They're this weird rock band that's kind of making its way in a world full of not rock music.
Right.
So if that's what's going on, then maybe we're heading towards a new 80s, which means that we're going to get a lot of music about, fucking groupies and getting drunk and shit. I don't know. Let's hope.
Strippers.
Fingers crossed. And then if
strippers and cocaine.
Yeah, if it keeps going after that, maybe we get some another 90s. I'm just hopefully I live long enough to see at least one more fertile period of good music before I fucking shuffle off this mortal coil. Please, that's all I ask.
Yeah, just a small request.
I mean, I look, I'm open-minded to new shit. I give everything a fair chance. I'm not closed off to the new music. I'm not, the thing is that, I mean, maybe I'm not quite old enough to be in the damn kids and their music demographic yet. But, I feel like every generation has looked at the generation that comes after it and be like, oh, my God, their music is so crazy. Oh, it's crazy. It's wild. And I feel like I'm just looking at it like, oh, my God, it's so fucking lame.
Yeah.
So pussified. So weak sauce. And that's a sad place to be. I thought, the envelope can be pushed further than this. Come on. Maybe it was 9/11 that ruined everything, because there was this fucking conventional wisdom after 9/11 that there's no point in trying to shock people anymore because the world is too shocking now. There's shock is dead now. It's no, it's not.
Right.
You could have come out with an album like Fuck the Victims of 9/11, the album, I mean, you could have still shocked people and pissed people off. No one no one had the balls to do it. So whatever. I don't know. I'm sad. I'm depressed about it. There's so much more you could have done, and it just didn't happen.
Yeah, I think that's that's probably overlooked a lot in these kinds of conversations, is how much 9/11 actually changed the direction of culture. Or
Oh, yeah,
at least,
for sure.
At least American/Canadian culture, because let's face it, most of our culture is run off American culture. So
Yeah, you guys are just diet America.
hey, why do you think we all live huddled up to you along the border? It's because we're just steeping up that American entertainment, and
Yeah, you guys are like America Zero.
yeah, we're like Americans but cold.
Yeah, colder America.
Yeah, yeah.
Like America, but colder and slightly less violent. Actually, much less violent, but you know.
Yeah. Well, there's not as many of us. We're pretty spread out, so we don't have a chance to get in each other's way as much.
Yeah, by the time you guys get a gun and try to figure out a victim, you're just like, fuck it, too far.
Fuck it.
Too
Yeah.
cold.
Yeah, it's like an hour away. Fuck it.
I ain't driving.
But that's actually a convenient segue, because I wanted to do something a little bit cheesy here. But we have something called Canadian content laws on Canadian radio and TV, which don't really apply to Freethink, but in the spirit of Canadian content law, I was going to ask you a few either-or questions about Canadian music and entertainment, if you're willing.
I probably don't know much, but we can we can do it.
They're pretty basic. Okay, so Kids in the Hall or Trailer Park Boys?
I mean, can I just set myself on fire instead?
Oh, you're breaking my heart.
Oh man, I really hate both of those.
Really? I'm genuinely surprised to hear that.
I guess I will do Trailer Park Boys.
Okay, fair enough. I won't criticize that choice.
But I mean, like, let me just make it clear: I despise both of those completely and utterly. So, you know, but I mean, like, it's not like I'm picking it. Like, I think Trailer Park Boys is clearly superior. Like, okay, the thing about Trailer Park Boys is everyone says it's funny, but it's not. The thing about Kids in the Hall is it maybe it's kind of funny sometimes, but it's really just more annoying. Like, I'm just annoyed by its presence every time I see it. Hold on, I have my phone ringing here. Give me 1 second.
Sure, no worries.
Sorry to interrupt the flow of things.
It's all good.
Hey, I'm in the middle of doing my interview. You there? Hello? Yeah. Never mind. Go ahead. More either-ors.
All right, I got
hit me up.
two more for you. Okay, so now music. Rush or Tragically Hip?
Rush.
Rush. Okay, solid choice. Do you care to elaborate?
You know, I mean, I don't know, Tom Sawyer's a good song. What's she gonna do, you know?
All right. I go for Closer to the Heart, personally, but that's still solid choice.
Yeah.
Okay, and now final category, Jim Carrey or Mike Myers?
Oh, definitely Jim Carrey.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, I don't like everything Jim Carrey's ever done, but, I mean, first of all, Jim Carrey actually changed the face of comedy in a way that Michael Myers just never did. Jim Carrey actually is good as a dramatic actor. Not always, but sometimes. Mike Myers as a dramatic actor fucking sucks really bad. Jim Carrey, even though he's put out some stinkers, has never put out anything even close to being as bad as the fucking Love Guru. Jim Carrey just has, I mean, he has more impressions, he has more fucking kinetic energy, he could do more, I mean, I don't know, he's better physical comic. Maybe Mike Myers
versatile. Definitely more versatile.
You know, Mike Myers definitely has some super iconic shit he did. You know, Austin Powers is great, don't get me wrong. Shrek, the first two Shrek films, pretty good. That's another thing about Jim Carrey that Jim Carrey never did that Mike Myers did, is just ride a concept into the fucking ground until it's no longer funny.
Mike Myers has done that a few times.
Yeah, he's done that more than once. Like he keeps trying to do. He tried to do the franchise stuff, and the real litmus test is Jim Carrey can still get work, and I haven't seen Mike Myers around in a fucking while. So, I think Jim Carrey just, I don't know, across the board, he's got to be the winner on that one.
Yeah. Well, the only reason it's a toss up for me is because Wayne's World, the original, is so close to my heart.
Right. That's a great movie.
But yeah, I mean, it's Dana Carvey kind of disappeared into oblivion too. So
yeah,
but and
well, he did Master of Disguise, so that pretty much sealed his fate.
Yeah, that was the end of that.
Look, you can't make a movie as bad as Master of Disguise or as bad as The Love Guru and expect to still get work. I mean, those are just so bad. Like, the worst Carrie ever did was probably like that penguin shit, or maybe the
Cable Guy was a rough moment for him.
Yeah, I mean, well, that was not well received at the time, but I think that movie actually is underrated. I think that movie's actually pretty good, but that's a debate for another time, maybe. Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess we'll wrap it up there. Thank you again so much, TJ, for taking the time. And not that you need any publicity from me, but people who are listening should check out the Amazing Atheist channel, the Deep Fried Fat channel. Check out Pessimist Productions on Patreon, and follow TJ on Twitter, TJ Kirk, Amazing Atheist. And also, thank you for listening. Thank you again, TJ.
Thank you.